right. Well, thank you all for coming, and I hope everybody was able to see the Duncan Wardle keynote. That was amazing, so really enjoyed that, and I guess my takeaway from that is that I need to spend more time outside the office, because that's when I get all my critical thinking done. But I'm Scott White, and I'm here with FleetCor. We're sponsoring this breakout, so I want to thank you all for coming. FleetCor, for those of you that don't know, we're a business payments company. We're headquartered here in Atlanta, and we're focused on really helping businesses make payments in a more efficient way. So we help with AP automation on the back end for a lot of your back office work, and then we also provide payment cards for employees that might be in the field to help control spending. So with that, excited to be really sponsoring this one with Aerospace Technologies in Georgia. So I'll turn it over to Amy.
Scott, appreciate it. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Now if this was an airplane, y'all would be fighting to get up to the front. Since it's a conference room, we're fighting at the back. So I'm Amy Hudnall, and can y'all hear me in the back? I'm Amy Hudnall, and I'm the director of the Center of Innovation for Aerospace at the Georgia Department of Economic Development. The Centers of Innovation are unique to Georgia, and we think in the US and in the world. We are all people from the industry that we serve, and we don't do just tax credits and y'all come to Georgia and I'll give you tax credits and Coca-Cola. We provide technical support to the industry that's already here. We have aerospace engineers on our team, and we go out and work hand in hand with companies who may have a technical challenge they need to solve. Sometimes it's just a business connection that they need. Sometimes the best thing we can do for them is to find them a grad student, that's the best technology transfer for a small company perhaps. And one of the areas that we've been working in for the past 9 years is unmanned aircraft systems. And when we first went to our commissioner and told him that we wanted to begin this work, he kind of said, what? And here we are 9 years later, UAS definitely part of our everyday landscape and moving on. We met these two gentlemen through our UAS working group, and these guys are really doing some exciting work. Brad Mandala is the Director of Flight Operations at Airbus Intelligence North America. Before taking that role, he led flight operations at other industry leaders such as Airware and Google's Project Wing, as well as being a veteran of the US Army. And Walt Wylupek is the Chief Technology Officer at Atlanta Drone Group Skyfire Consulting. And he's a bit of a Renaissance man. He was the Chief of Emergency Medical Services at Emory, and then he decided to develop proprietary trading algorithms for stock and options trading. He did that for a while using AI and computational neuroscience before finally turning his attention to drones. So these are guys with deep backgrounds in aerospace technologies. Brad, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about what Airbus Intelligence is doing?
Sure. Very nice to be here, everybody. Thank you for coming. Pretty sure a few of you were paid by Amy over here to be in here. But so Airbus decided to make an investment into commercial UAS about 3-4 years ago. They're big on the overseas in Europe on Airbus Defense Space and making military UAS, but commercial is a whole different entity. They decided that they wanted to start this up in the US. So Airbus Aerial was kind of founded as, I guess you call it an entrepreneurship kind of idea to push new ideas and new ways of thinking. And they hired a lot of us from startups on the West Coast and brought a lot of local people as well. And trying to disrupt internally into Airbus how they do business, as well as kind of bring fresh ideas and new ways of thinking, new ways of development to kind of a traditional aerospace market. Recently, Aerial is kind of was more of a DBA. We're merging with Airbus Intelligence, which is the larger group within the U.S. Airbus, believe it or not, is the largest operator of commercial satellites in the world. We're launching 4 more over the next 2 years. They're going to bring 30 centimeter data, about 10 different spectral bands. And so really what Airbus Intelligence is a remote sensing data analytics company. Seems weird in an aerospace company that develops airlines that some of you may have flown on to get here today or be flying out on later. But that's, we're relatively diverse. We bring that into manned aircraft as well as UAS, and that's kind of where they brought me aboard, was to kind of help push forward this kind of way of doing business and remote sensing. So we don't actually build drones. We do, but not commercial. We're not really in that space. What we do is we're kind of tapping into what we already do on the satellite side, but then using higher resolution data, as well as some of our data services that we provide. We have our own, we're a Lance authorized USS. We're one of the 11 in the country. So we have our own ability to tap directly into the FAA and provide aerospace authorization. We have granular weather data down to 1 kilometers. So every kilometer around the world, mostly in the US at this point, we're expanding worldwide, we can get you a micro level forecast. We also have algorithms for flight planning, optimization. We have detect and avoid efforts that we're leading right now using vision-based systems and ground-based radar. Kind of, if you put all that together, what we are is the data side of where we're going in the future with UAS, which is, for 90 to 95% of most of the work is going to be completely autonomous. Either delivery, either agriculture, oil and gas, you name it. A lot of these routine things, you're not going to have a pilot anymore. Once we get to the type certification and we have the data science behind it to back it up, a lot of this stuff is going to become routine, mundane. What we have Walt over here doing, that's going to be kind of more the tip of the spear, the cutting edge in terms of where you're going to need that skill from a pilot standpoint in terms of running complex jobs that you can't automate. So we're looking more at the side of what's, I don't want to say easy to automate, but something you actually can automate. Maybe not now, but sometime in the next year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, and kind of merge all that together. And it really comes down to, we just want data. We want data faster. We want data with higher fidelity. We want, we don't want to have to, pilots are expensive, and a lot of our customers, already are in the agriculture business, already are in the oil and gas business. And, a lot of those, their margins are very thin. They can't sit there, they can't afford to have a fleet of pilots. But what they do want, especially when you look at high value crops, they need that data to make decisions. So it's kind of like this fine line of where, how much can I afford to pay? How much can I afford to lose? And it's kind of an interesting intersection in terms of customers, as we also support the insurance market. But so crops like almond farms, they actually have their trees insured, on a per tree basis. And so there's this intersection of multiple, industries that are interested in this data. So it really, it's kind of fascinating. I won't say we figured it out yet, but that's, the direction that we're going to. And that's, in a nutshell, kind of what Airbus does.
Could you talk a little bit about the insurance work that you did, like with the California fires, and how the different levels of data were put together?
Sure. So we've built doesn't really have a name, but it's a data platform where our satellites over time have imaged the world over and over and over and over again. There's nowhere on Earth that we haven't imaged within the last year. And around high population centers, there's nowhere on Earth that we haven't imaged within the last 6 months. And so what we've created is this database in the cloud where we can stream data like Google Earth. And you can sit there and toggle the date you want to go back and forth. But it's a seamless image called One Atlas is the name of the product. And what we do is we get fires. So California wildfires. You have an interesting dilemma. There's a lot of high value homes. A lot of them burn down. Insurance companies don't know which ones. Oftentimes you can't get in for weeks to figure out what's going on. Is the house destroyed? Now, traditional methods of getting data with a manned aircraft, a lot of times there's a temporary flight restriction up, so you can't get an aircraft in, you can't get a drone in. So it becomes this dance of how can we get the data? If there's too much smoke, satellites can't see through it. So you're kind of coming up with smoke masks and kind of things to pull the data out, imaging multiple times a day to try to get around the clouds, multiple days in a row. And then what we do is we eventually get that data. We can pull the smoke out of the way, and we've developed algorithms that can determine whether or not the house is still there. And we'll sit there and basically run that analysis on there. And usually once we get a clean image, within 4 hours we can do a 18 by 18 kilometer square analysis, and we'll just do those over and over and kind of grid it out. And then we push that to the insurance companies. And a lot of times what these insurance companies do, when there's a big event, they'll send out mobile trailers with phones, with agents, so you can call loved ones, you can get help that you need, and you also can file a claim. And I'm not at liberty to say which customer, but one of our customers was able to file claims that day. So I'm going to walk in and be, I don't know what the status of my house is, and like, you know what, we're really sorry to inform you, your house is no longer there, but here's a check. We're going to get you into a hotel, or we're going to get you somewhere safe. And what this does for insurance companies, they have to pay. But what happens when you have a big event is you have multiple insurance companies all fighting to get their people in the hotels closer to home. And the insurance company that can act the fastest gets the cheapest rates. They can lock in the contractors, to rebuild homes faster. They can make their customers happy. It's a sad loss if their house burns down, but at the same point, you're like, thank God we're okay. We have money. There's a path forward. So that's a little bit of what we do. I'm sorry if it was a little long-winded.
That's very interesting. Walt, do you want to give us the overview of what a drone and Skyfire is doing?
Yeah, certainly. I can hear myself, so I assume you guys can hear me in the back. So, again, my name is Walt Wylupek. I'm Chief Technology Officer for Skyfire Consulting. And what Skyfire does, we're nowhere near the size of an Airbus, obviously. We're tiny, where there's about 12 of us in the office. So, but we've done some pretty interesting things, I think. We actually provide unmanned aerial systems for public safety, public health, environmental applications, and oil and gas, and pretty much everything in between. We are actually, we're in about 300 different municipalities nationwide where we've set up drone programs. We've set up drone programs for agencies as big as like LA Fire, Houston Fire, Miami-Dade, and we do a lot with FDNY even, just to give you an idea of some of our clients. But we also do emergency response. We'll actually travel out to hurricanes with the Weather Channel and CBS National News. We'll plug into their satellite trucks. We have a lot of war stories with Jim Cantori, for example. He's every bit as intense in person as he is on television. Never breaks character. But anyway, it's a whole nother rabbit hole right there. But anyway, we recently actually also, we dabble in the medical drone delivery space. Again, something that's going to be very highly automated, as Brad was saying, drone deliveries. But we were actually able to, we actually performed the very first medical sample transports, or actually simulated medical transports, are actually little test tubes filled full of water to simulate blood samples. We flew 40 simulated samples for the U.S. Virgin Islands Department of Health and the Association of Public Health Laboratories. We flew them a distance of 43 miles from St. Croix to St. Thomas back in November. All open ocean. That's an interesting case study in and of itself. And it's actually a good example of situations worldwide. Several years ago, two Category 5 hurricanes, two back-to-back Category 5 hurricanes actually wiped out a lot of the infrastructure in the U.S. Virgin Islands, including a lot of boats and stuff like that they use for sample transport. Well, today, despite modern technology, despite it being American soil, it still takes on average a week to get a medical sample from one island to an island, at least economically, if you can believe that. You can't charter a seaplane every time you need to fly a little sample out, so it takes them a week on average, so people stop going to the doctor there. But that's a huge problem that we're really wanting to solve down there for them. We also dabble in a little bit in oil and gas. For example, down in Suriname, we actually do air monitoring for their state oil company down there. They actually genuinely care about their population, so they don't have an EPA down there. So what we're doing with them is actually doing air monitoring around the refineries. We're doing things like VOC detection and 3D plume modeling and stuff like that to kind of help keep the surrounding communities safe. But stateside, as far as oil and gas goes, we're actually we just announced a new project that we're working on, covering about 5,000 miles of pipeline for change detection. It's for one of the world's largest pipeline companies, and they're very concerned about slow leaks that can happen from time to time and stuff like that. That sometimes their sensors can't even pick up. So whenever there is a slow leak, and it's exceptionally rare, but whenever there is one, the grass and the vegetation around the pipeline will actually change colors. But what we're doing is we're going to actually have airborne sensors up and down the pipeline. Drone-mounted sensors with multispectral cameras and other sensors to detect changes that are not visible to the naked eye. And that's, that generates a tremendous amount of data. We're actually building an AI to actually go through all that data heck, that's what he does all day, every day, basically, what Airbus does, but on a much larger scale. But yeah, it's just economically just not feasible to have a human being look at all that data, or, a huge team of human beings look at all that data, whereas the AI will be able to tell you where the sick vegetation is at any given moment pretty much instantaneously. So we're working on the pipeline side, but I think what a lot of you guys may be interested in is the FAA's IPP program, which is really kind of paving the way for regulations going forward. And we're team members in the San Diego IPP. If you're not familiar with the IPP, it's actually the FAA's program, the Integration Pilot Program, where they have several test sites across the country where they don't necessarily relax the regulations, but they actually fast track waivers such as BV loss waivers. But out in San Diego, beyond visual line of sight. We're team members in the San Diego IPP, where we actually acquired the very first BV loss waiver for public safety emergency operations in the country. So what they're doing out in San Diego, well, technically Chula Vista, which is a suburb of, I think, 300,000 right near San Diego, the Chula Vista Police Department are actually dispatching drones directly from 911 call centers out to calls. And this has been going on for about a year. When we first started, we're like, can this even be done? 1, 2, does it make sense to do? But the data have been absolutely overwhelmingly supportive of that concept. Just to give you an idea, over the past year, and they're not launched out to every call. There's actually a mission or a watch commander that makes the call whether or not to send a drone out. This is all done manually. But they dispatched the drone about 1,700 times. They've flown 1,700 missions over the past year that resulted in 250 arrests directly attributed to the drone. Meaning that had the drone not shown up on scene minutes before officers showed up, a bad guy could have gotten away or done more harm and stuff like that. And obviously it helps keep the officers a lot safer. They know exactly what they're getting into, critical situation. They know if there's an active shooter, where the active shooter is, whether or not to scale up operations, where to send additional resources and things like that. So, but before I ramble on any longer, that's kind of the high points of what we've been working on.
Really exciting, and you're able to get the drone there in.
Yeah, the average response time went from, I can't remember exactly what it was, a few minutes down to about 130 seconds. So that's their average response time. That's unprecedented as far as I know.
Really making a difference. And are they using it for the fires as well?
They are not currently using it for fires, but we have a lot of clients nationwide who are really keeping an eye on the FAA's IPP, what we're doing out there, and they absolutely want to do it for fire. So
really useful for fires. I'm going to ask you to tell one more story, and that's tell a little bit about your work with the Super Bowl. And why that.
Oh yeah, so the Super Bowl, we're actually this was the Super Bowl in Atlanta last year. We actually worked with the FBI. Gosh, numerous, I can't even count them, how many federal, state, and local agencies that we worked with to provide Overwatch. It was actually the very first Overwatch that the FBI and all these agencies had done of a Tier 1 international sporting event. So we're able to have tethered drones, drones that have that are connected to the ground with a tiny little tether that feed up power so we can fly indefinitely, basically. And we're just monitoring the crowds that way. It's a public space, we're obviously we take privacy very seriously, but when you're out and about with like 200,000 people, it's always good to be able to keep them safe however you can while maintaining privacy as best you can. But
just the paperwork to get that done.
Yeah, the paperwork is crazy. Yeah, and that and the craziest airspace in the country. Couple that with the TFR and every governmental agency flying their helicopters simultaneously. It was pretty wild, but we worked like a year ahead of time to make sure it was done safely, legally, and effectively. So
Well, how, you both have been in business, how long have you been in business?
Almost exactly 5 years, end of 2014.
So I have to change my number and say, you know, how does your business today look different than it did 3 years ago?
Can we go with 5? Because that was the canned answer that I prepared. It's changed a lot since. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go with 5. So yeah, actually, I have a really great story that not just sums up my business, but the UAS industry in general. So back in this is a quick story, I promise. I won't bore you to death. Back in 2014, you know, we weren't even a company yet. One of my co-founders, Matt Sloan, was a medical news producer for CNN for about 14 years. We worked hand in hand with Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Well, 2014 is kind of when drones really went mainstream, you know, for hobbyists and things like that. Excuse me. And they actually assigned Matt to cover an event down at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. More specifically, they wanted Matt to ask the fire chiefs and police chiefs on hand what they thought about drones, because people were doing really stupid things with them. I mean, flying over wildfires, preventing, forestry service and firefighting planes from coming in, stuff like that. So CNN wanted Matt to cover that. So it's so funny. The night before, Matt had never flown a drone before. The night before, he went into a Best Buy, picked up, a little DJI Phantom, took it on site, took it to the event, and asked, these fire departments, these chiefs, chiefs of these major organizations, what they thought about drones. They're like, actually, I've never seen one before. They haven't been a problem at all. Hey, that's pretty cool. Can we go take it out back and fly it? So Matt's like trying to figure out how the heck to work the darn thing, but they figure it out, they get it flying, and gosh, he said like the masses, just congregated around the drone. They're like, that was like the coolest thing they'd ever seen. All these chiefs, these fire chiefs, police chiefs are like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. That would be so useful at emergency scenes, on emergency scenes, and this would be so helpful for my guys, keeping them safe, seeing what we can't see from the ground. And so they asked Matt, how do we incorporate that into, our daily operations? And Matt was like, I have no idea. Let me find out and get back to you. And literally the next day, Skyfire was founded. So, but yeah, and then that was almost exactly 5 years ago today. Fast forward now, we're in like 300 municipalities, coast to coast, and working on some pretty cool, at least cool to us stuff anyway. Maybe not to y'all, but to us. So it's definitely come a long way. They just, back then they saw them as toys, and over the past few years, they've proven themselves in the field to actually save lives. I think on average, there's a recent white paper that was published out in the field. It saves like 2 to 3 lives per week on average, coast to coast. Whether it be like, providing situational awareness or actually flying life preservers out to people who are drowning, and just anything and everything in between. So.
We did a training with the FAA at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center for officers there, and people came, and there was one contingent that was using them, and there was one contingent that was getting pushed to use them. And at the end of the day, after everybody had a chance to fly in all these different scenarios where we had, a burning aircraft, we had somebody who was lost, we had somebody that was, in the water, everybody was like, oh, we need this now, and we need to get smart on how to use it.
Oh, for sure.
Brad, how about you? How has your world changed in the last 5 years?
My world. So my world's been a little bit different in that, I started back in 2003 flying UAS for the military, and all the way through 2013, for about 10 years I was, military, and then contractor, chief pilot for Textron. So, my world has always been working with the UAS that were point designed for specific use case. After, then I went to Google, and that gets to the 5-year mark. I was on the Titan Aerospace program building high-altitude pseudosatellites, aircraft that fly 70,000 feet in the air indefinitely, solar-powered, and then to Project Wing, which is another point-designed aircraft, actually a series of aircraft until the final design was decided on, to do delivery, and then to Airbus, which was the big leap for me, but it wasn't 5 years ago, it was about 3, where instead of a point-designed aircraft, now it was more of the data side, But I can say that in 5 years, the market has changed. Like Walt said, like people didn't know what drones were. They thought it was, predators, slamming hellfires down on the terrorists. But, and so there's a bad, I don't know necessarily that there's a good view of drones yet. People do a lot of stupid things with them still to this day. Some people shut down Heathrow for 48 hours almost by flying drones consistently into the path, and they had to divert traffic around London. And things like this, they had another one in New York. Somebody crashed a Phantom into a Black Hawk. You have drone sightings around airports all the time. You get people looking in windows, doing stupid things. So I think there's this public perception that's still bad, but I think that's slightly getting better as people can see the applicability of this technology in their lives. And I think that's probably the biggest change I've seen is all these different industries over the past 5 years have kind of changed their viewpoint in terms of that's weird, I don't like it, to that's kind of interesting, this actually may be able to help me do my job better or get me more information that I need or safety and that kind of thing. So I think that's probably the change that I've seen the most. So I'm sorry I kind of danced around your question, but
It has changed radically. I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to let the audience ask questions. I have lots of them, but so how has being part of the technology ecosystem here in Georgia, how has that been advantageous to your business?
There's multiple advantages to being in Atlanta. We have Georgia Tech as a feeder program where we can get talented new students and new engineers, new people that we need. We can get anywhere in the world almost in a single hop from Atlanta to, it's just especially useful getting to home base in Toulouse. But then what I will say from the different communities that I've been in technology in San Francisco, San Jose, to here is people are more earnest. So West Coast is a lot of pie in the sky mentalities, and billions of dollars are getting wasted on things that aren't even a problem. Why are we investing money in that? But I think the technology here, because I think you have a lot of large companies, UPS, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, they see this technology and they want it for real problems that they have. They don't, want to drop life preservers to drowning surfers. I mean, it's a very solid use case, but how much money is there in that? Really not much. How many, lifeguard agencies are going to buy it? But when we can sit there and scan, 16 million, square feet of roof for Prologis to look for leaks, to get ahead of inventory getting damaged that they manage for their customers. These are real problems using cutting edge technology, but it's grounded in practicality. And that's what I see here in Georgia are practical engineering, people that want to solve everyday problems. And I really honestly think it's a very powerful thing. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to start seeing Atlanta, Georgia in particular, kind of start getting more recognition, more companies getting starting, companies getting larger, kind of around that space.
Yeah, exactly. Like Brad was saying, the talent pool in Georgia is unbelievable. I mean, we've had some just unbelievably talented interns and job candidates coming out of the incredible colleges like Georgia Tech and UGA and all that. But from a startup perspective, I mean, had we not started in Atlanta, there's no way we would be where we are today, period. I mean, if we started in San Fran, there's no way. I mean, we wouldn't have had the money to do it. There's a lot you can accomplish for a lot less with a similar talent pool, if not better talent pool, definitely more earnest talent pool than Georgia. So yeah, it's been absolutely tremendous. And the networking opportunities with, even as a small company, the networking, I'm sitting with Airbus for God's sakes, and I'm a tiny company of 12, okay? Just one example, but there's just so many big networking opportunities facilitated through Georgia Department of Economic Development and whatnot that have just been really key in our growth. So yeah, much appreciated.
Okay, so you guys have questions?
I have a pretty loud voice.
Speak up.
So I have to admit that I'm one of those people that kind of had that negative perception of drones, particularly around privacy, and what comes to mind is just walking in the park and seeing the drone all of a sudden above your head. So can you talk about, but I'm thrilled to hear about these other applications, but can you talk about privacy and what's being done to address those
Absolutely,
concerns?
yeah, absolutely. The question was about privacy, if you missed that. What's being done to address privacy issues, especially in law enforcement? Right now, we actually don't record any video any aerial video I should say imagery, not video. Any aerial imagery that the drone takes, it's basically like putting the officer's eyes in the sky. They're not recording, for one thing. Certain agencies would like to eventually record. That's out of our hands, but there are certain technologies such as, technology software that'll actually automatically blur out faces. It'll blur out license plates, words, things like that. You can actually, you can geofence particular neighborhoods so that if a drone needs to go from point A to point B, it'll automatically reroute the drone around, a highly populated area. There's just technology like that's already in existence. But yeah, it's definitely very controversial, but something we take very, very seriously because, we don't want to be spied on either, so.
But the privacy laws are the privacy laws, whether
exactly.
they're with your cell phone or anything else. So
Yep.
that's
a good
one
point.
thing to keep in mind. Now,
Would both of you say that your business is really, when it all comes down to it, data? Is that what it really is? Is that what it really comes down to? I mean, when I say data, also that includes imagery, but you're producing for your clients is data.
Absolutely, and the CEO of Intel made a really great quote when he was keynoting CES a couple years ago. Data is the new oil, and that is, that's been exactly the case. This guy has probably a lot more valuable input than I do as far as data goes.
I mean, imagery, video, it's all data. And what it comes down to is the derivatives you can pull from that data. But yes, so it is oil you can make. It is new oil, absolutely. Sorry, long rambling way to say yes.
someone else?
So the technology is great, but you got to have some people behind it to fly those drones. What's the training pipeline for that? And is that a limiter to put this technology out there?
I think it depends on the application. For highly complex things, like what Walt does, yes, but for my world, I'd rather hire somebody with a remote sensing or agriculture background and teach them to fly a drone. You can do that in 20 hours and they're legal. And most of these aircraft have so many safety features built into them, they're relatively safe. And I'd say within a month of flying after that, you're relatively competent. So it's more important to get the science, what you want to pull out of it, and then train the drone side.
Relatively easy. There's about 5,000 people in Georgia today that have their Part 107 certification, which is their remote pilot. But for more advanced, Amazon delivering packages, they're probably not going to use a Part 107 pilot. They're going to use, Part 121 or 135 pilot. So somebody with more experience. I saw somebody over here had a question.
Actually, it's for you, Amy.
Okay.
I don't know if you can address this or not, but I'm curious to know what Spaceport Camden is doing. We saw that they had to delay their licensing, or they wanted to look at it as more of a smaller launch port as opposed to something similar to Camden.
Yeah, I think they really wanted to differentiate themselves between, they're talking about mostly vertical launch, although they have done some horizontal launches off the coast there using, this is 2 Georgia companies, using a Gulfstream 400 and for a Gulfstream 450 and launching nanosatellites basically out of a torpedo tube. So they get the Gulfstream up as high as they can and then launch this thing. So that's Generation Orbit here in Dunwoody that is doing those tests and utilizing a Gulfstream as their launch facility. But what Spaceport Camden wants to do is to look at more of the smaller nano satellites, CubeSats, that kind of thing, and not try to compete with Kennedy. So there's advantages. There are advantages to launching from Spaceport Camden. For me, it's a little bit of a numbers game. I think that as the commercial space industry heats up, there's more opportunities, right? Right now, there's 12 launch facilities in the U.S., and only about 4 are very active. So, not quite the market yet there, but if you're not ready, you'll never be part of it. So, I'm excited about it. They have basically restarted their clock, so they had their time frame, and I just went back and forth with Steve Howard, who's the county administrator, and they're anticipating to get their final approval of their EIS pretty soon. So, yeah, but smaller.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of their markets.
What's the time frame of possible launch? Like, what's your estimate?
I won't even venture a guess, because first they're very committed. Camden has done a great job preparing for this, educating the community, working through this environmental impact study, and they're drawing interest from companies. So I can say that they're drawing interest from companies so we'll see. One more back. Really? Oh, okay.
I was just curious, for both of you, what do you see as the biggest hardware limitation right now with the drones that you're using? Flight time, speed, or is it just the sensors on board? Just curious about that, thanks.
From my point of view, I think there's 2 things, batteries and sensors. Yes, so batteries, we can't fly long enough. There's some companies that are fixing that, possible Aerospace out in California, 75-minute flight time on a US manufactured drone, which is huge right now. And the other thing, our sensors, is we have mostly a general suite of sensors. Your typical electro-optical, hyperspectral, multispectral, and you're trying to figure out how to play between the lines of what bands you really need. But I think once this becomes more and more useful, we're going to get sensors that are, again, point designed for specific solutions, and that'll really kind of help that scale.
It's all about the batteries. When you find that company, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with Brad. It's flight time and sensors. For the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's really unusual to use a quad or a multi-rotor. Usually for distances, you want to use like a fixed wing or a VTOL, just because it's so much more efficient. But for this particular test, we used a multi-copter just to prove that it could be done with a multi-copter. Basically, I think it set an endurance record. But yeah, we flew 43 miles on a under 55-pound multi-copter. It was actually powered by a hydrogen fuel cell. So it actually has a 2-hour flight time in the United States. Long story short, there are some international spec models with the same tank, same hardware, same everything. They'll fly for 4 hours just because you're able to put more gas in the tank, if you will. You can fly at twice the pressures than you can legally in the United States. But yeah, anyway, I'm getting the sign here so to cut off here. But okay, yeah. So yeah, flight time and sensors.
So I'll start by saying I'm a huge drone enthusiast, right? So we've got a DJI Mavic at the house, and the boys and I love it. So I guess that the thing that I'm thinking about is what's coming, right? What are the things that we're not even realizing that are applications that are out there for drones? Is there anything really cool that you haven't mentioned today that's like you won't believe what's coming next? And then second level question, this is more simple. When do you think we'll see commercial aircraft flying as drones, right? Pilotless planes flying people.
So okay. So the first question, I think the biggest thing you're going to see, and it's going to happen this year, 99% sure anyways, type certification of UAS, which is, like your Amazons, your Googles, and there's other companies out there as well, which basically will be drones in a box or from a nest or whatever they're going to call it, that won't have a pilot needed. I think that's going to be the biggest thing you're going to see. It's going to be partial type certification this year. You're going to still need a visual observer, no pilot, but a visual observer with the kill switch. And then once we figure out the detect and avoid, situation, remote ID, you'll see that within the next 2-3 years go away. And you'll see deliveries will be happening on the regular. On the UAM side, UAM is urban air mobility or flying taxis. 2025 is going to be a big year, but I don't think we're going to see full aerospace integration until 2030. So, but I'd keep an eye out for the Paris Olympics, wink, wink, and see what kind of happens there in terms of announcements and things like that.
What Brad said.
That's awesome, thanks.